Hello everyone, you're welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, you are very much welcome. But please take note of that. There are previous videos that you want to have a look at. I'm pretty sure you're a student who want to gain very good understanding of the IGCSE Physics. We've discussed topics like units and measurements, motion, forces. We are still discussing forces. You want to have a look at those ones to get a better understanding and then continue from there. As we continue with forces, today we want to have a look at friction. Friction is a force that opposes one surface from moving or trying to move over another. Or it's a force that prevents the relative sliding motion of one surface over another. And friction is something that we've all experienced before in one way or the other. For example, if you try to rub your palms together, you realize that you're unable to do it smoothly. And with time, it produces heat because of the friction that exists between the palms of your hands. Friction can be of help. For example, if you want to lift an object, friction is what helps you to be able to grip these objects without them slipping through your palms. If there was no friction when you lift up something, you wouldn't be able to get a firm grip of it because it will slip through your hands. Friction is what enables us to be able to walk. There is friction between the soles of our feet and the ground on which we walk. Without it, we would slip and wouldn't be able to walk. So then we can clearly see that friction is very advantageous because it helps us in doing a number of things. Friction though has side effects too. What are some of these side effects of friction that I want to take note of? So some side effects of friction includes resistance to motion. You may be wondering, but I just mentioned that friction helps us to be able to walk. Yes, that is true. But then in a number of ways, friction prevents motion of objects. For example, if an object is at rest and we want to start moving it, there is usually friction that prevents us from doing that. If an object is in motion, friction makes it a bit difficult for the object to move smoothly because it will be resisting that motion. Very soon we'll be looking at some types of friction to help us see how friction makes motion sometimes a bit difficult. Friction produces heat and it also produces wear and tear. We buy new shoes, we walk in them, but then with time you realize that the soles of the shoe doesn't remain the same because of the friction that exists between the soles of our feet and the ground on which we walk. That is the wear and tear that friction produces. Let us look at the types of friction now. Alright, so the types of friction that we have. The first one is static friction, which is the friction or the force that needs to be overcome before an object at rest slides into motion. When an object is at rest, there is friction between the object and the surface on which it is resting. That friction which resists the motion of the object is referred to as static friction. When the frictional force is equal to the force trying to cause the motion of the object will not move, it will still be at rest. So the object will only start moving when the force wanting to cause the motion becomes greater than the static friction. If an object is already in motion, there is still frictional force that exists between the object and the surface on which it is moving, and this is referred to as dynamic or kinetic friction. So then, dynamic or kinetic friction is a force that resists the relative motion of one surface over another once an object is in motion. Static friction is therefore always greater than kinetic friction. And please take note of when we have static friction and when we have dynamic friction. Static, not moving. So that friction exists when the object is at rest and the force wants to cause the object to start moving. Dynamic friction is when the object is already in motion. There is still friction between the surfaces, and so refer to that one as dynamic or kinetic friction. If we look at the image depicted, we see friction at work between two surfaces. If we consider the object to be a block resting on a table, friction exists between the surfaces in contact. In this diagram here, we see the object is being moved towards the left. Friction always acts to oppose motion. And so if the object is being moved to the left, then what is going to happen is that because friction is meant to oppose a motion, friction is going to act towards the right. And that is what is shown over here. There's this between the surfaces and friction is directed towards the right. In this diagram, the object is being pushed towards the right. Friction again is meant to oppose the motion, and so friction is going to act towards the left. So the point to note is that friction opposes motion, and so if the object is being moved, friction is also always going to act in the opposite direction. Friction is high when the surfaces are rough. If we have rough surfaces in contact, there is always going to be more friction. And so it becomes very difficult for you to slide an object into motion or for a moving object to continue moving if the surfaces are rough, because friction is going to be very high. How then do we reduce friction? Friction can be reduced by reducing the contact between surfaces. The more objects are in contact, the more friction that we have, because we know friction exists between surfaces in contact. Rough surfaces have more friction, and so one is smoothing surfaces. And one way by which we can smoothing surfaces is by lubricating them. And we do that by using a lubricant. A lubricant is a slippery substance that reduces friction. We can also reduce friction by streamlining surfaces. For example, the surfaces of or the bodies of cars are streamlined to reduce friction, which happens in the form of air resistance. Air resistance is a form of friction. Therefore, to reduce that friction or the air resistance that is acting, the surfaces of cars are streamlined, smoothened to reduce the effect of air resistance. Thank you very much for staying for this short presentation on friction. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. Please be sure to subscribe, like, leave a comment. And if you have any suggestions or questions, please leave it in the comment below and we are going to address them. Thank you and see you in the next tutorial.